Hi friends, welcome back to Arc Tutorials. This is Angular 12 CRUD tutorials. This is the third part of this particular series. In the previous two parts, I have shown you basics of how to create and use some of the Angular material components along with some of the CRUD functionality, which is reading, creating and deleting. Today we'll continue that. We will add the update or edit feature to our application. Also, we will learn how to use some of the Angular material components in our application, add some validations, etc. Let's get started. Before I start coding, I'll request you to kindly check out the Angular 10 complete playlist that I have created. It covers everything from basic to advanced, and I'll keep adding to that particular playlist so that you can keep learning and mastering Angular. If you like my work, please do consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/arctutorials. Thank you in advance. Alright, so what is our game plan of learning this particular Angular 12 CRUD series? We are going to learn how to install Angular application, how to create, installing Angular material, learning how to use the Angular material components, services, routing, CRUD operations, validations, much more. So make sure that you check out all the parts of this particular series in order to learn and master Angular 12 CRUD operations. That being said, let's jump into today's coding part, which is the edit user. So before I go any further, for our viewers who are joining us new, allow me to demo whatever we have done so far that would give you and serve as a basis for us to start working. Alrighty, so that being said, so we have the list users, we have the route which says users module. It will get the top 10 users from the web API that we are using, which is the JSON free placeholder we are using. Then we added the view, which is only the minimum data as of now, will populate as we go further. Then we added the add user functionality. We can add a user, and we added the delete, right? So we deleted, we are using a snack bar, etc. So make sure that you check out the first two parts of this particular series as well. Alright, so that being said, today's topic first we'll start with focus on the edit functionality, and then we will go to the adding some jazziness like validations, pipes, etc. Alrighty, so I am in the edit user component that we created earlier in the series. It is blank. So what is edit functionality? So before I start coding, let me give you some notes on what edit does. Edit means you need to retrieve the data. So that is basically you are reading the data of whatever component or feature you're working on. So in our case, it is first we need to read the user's detail and then update them, right? So these are the two-step process for any edit or update. So first what we need to do is capture the route. If you go to our application here, when we click edit, in the route you see we have the value which is 1, or if you go here, that's the ID of that particular resource. So we need to capture that. So I'm going to use the activated route for that. So let's add it here. And like I say, friends, the best way to learn is to start coding along with me. Start coding so you will know what I'm doing so that you can also practice. So that being said, I imported activated route, and the first thing I need is to capture that. So I'm going to say this dot activated route dot params dot subscribe. So why I'm subscribing? Because whenever there is change in data, we can capture that. If you are used to RxJS, probably we should use a switch map. I'll cover that also as I promised, but not in this episode, but very soon I'll bring out the RxJS tutorial for you. I know a lot of you have been asking me that, and I will definitely roll it out very soon. Alright, so I'm going to have a user ID and I'm going to capture that, and since we called it ID, we need to pass ID. Now where is this ID defined? If you go back to our routing file, you would see that we have given here ID. So it should be the same name whatever you are using. We will assign it to a user ID. So I'm going to say user ID. For now I'm using any, but we will work on it and change it to something meaningful. Alright, so once we have the activated route, so this way we are capturing the ID of the user, that from the link we are capturing the ID. The next thing we have to do is retrieve the data. Okay, so we are going to say this dot user ID, right, is not equal to empty. So I'm saying that if the value is there, then only you get the data, right? That's a simple validation we can add in our code. Then we need to write a method in our service which will retrieve us the data. But remember, I told you that edit requires two, which is reading, that is view user, and then update user. So if you see our user.service ts, we already have a method for view user that we implemented earlier in the series. So we are going to use this to retrieve the data for the user that we captured. So I'm going to say here this dot user service. So we need a user service. So let's inject that as well in the constructor and create an instance and user service. So as part of this series, I'm sure you're learning routing, services, much more, right? Let me know how you are finding this series. I always look forward to your comments. So I'm going to say this dot user ID. So here what I'm saying, I'm passing the user ID that I captured here from the activated route. Now once that is done, I'm going to usually we will write a subscribe when you want to listen to a data which is continuous source. But in our case, we don't need a continuous source. So I'm going to write this promise. Why? Because I will make a call only once and I need to get the data. I have explained this exclusively in one of the tutorial which is about observables, subscribe. All of this I've covered in detail. The link is in the description box below. Please do check out if you want to learn about subscribe observable. Alright, so to promise, then we have to implement a then. So here I'm going to say I'm going to get the data which I'm going to implement here, and then means once this call is done and I'll get the data, what needs to happen? So I'm going to create one instance here and call it user details. Again, I'm putting any, but usually we will typecast it. So here I'm going to say this dot user details is equal to data. I'm assigning it to the variable. Now we will use this data to display in the form. So what am I going to do? We have to simply say here, now this is the tricky part, that what kind of data are you doing so that you want to work with it, right? So we can also, some people would do something like this, object.assign so details comma. This is also totally perfectly all right, right? So what you're doing, you're assigning an object data to this particular variable that we created. That's fine as well. Now this is done, right? So if you just want to confirm whether we are getting the correct data or not, we can just do a user details and console log it. All right, all good so far, no errors. The code looks neat and clean. Now we are in the list users. Let me open console. Let me clear earlier ones. And here I'm going to click on this edit. Now it is edit/5. Go to console. You would see the details from the view method. Okay, this is step 1, that is capturing the data. Now we need to work on the step 2, which is creating the form and displaying it, right? So we will say once we have the details, we will build the edit form here. Okay, so this is view user details, and then we will build the edit form here. So for that we will need form builder. So let's import that as well. Form builder. Okay, so we got the form builder, and here I'm going to say let's create a form. So let's create a form object also, and I'm going to say edit user form is of type form group is equal to new form group, and I'm going to put it, sorry, okay, so empty form group for now, and we will extend it here. And here I'll say this dot edit form user group is equal to this dot form builder dot group. Now this is where we will add our details. So what we are going to do, we are going to add the fields to this particular edit form and initialize the form with values. So again, I'm going to stick with the previous two fields that we used just to help you in learning and not make it complicated. Now here if you see the add user, we left it empty here, right? Why? Because we want it to be blank for add user. But when it comes to edit user, we need to assign the value. So what we are going to do, we are going to assign the value from this dot user details dot. Now here we can typecast it, right? So I'm putting it name here, and here we'll put email. Similarly, new form control, this dot user details dot email. Okay, so what I'm doing, I'm building a form with a group which has two fields, name and email. This will be my form, right? Nothing complicated, simple so far. We capture the user ID. Once the user ID is captured, we make a request to get the user's details. Once we have the details, then we build the edit form. All right. Now, since we have the edit form here, it's a good idea always to, whenever you write, then you should always write a catch just in case if there is any error. All right. So I am using to promise and I'm writing a then, and I'm capturing the error with catch. All right. Also, if you want certain option to trigger or something, you can also use finally also. But in our case, we don't need that. All right, so far so good. We got our data, we built the form. Now let's go ahead and fix the UI piece for it. So go to HTML template. Now here, same way what we did for um, the create user, we'll write form. We will assign a form group equal to, and then give the same name of the form that we mentioned in our component, which is edit user form. A lot of times people will make mistake of not giving the same name. So see here, this is the form name, so I'm using the same here. Now once that is done, the next step is we'll probably need a submit method. So I'm going to call it update user. Okay, and we'll implement that in just a bit. All right. So here we need to copy the form, right? So I'm going to make use from the add that we did, right? That will save us some time. So just copy any two fields, whatever fields you want, put them inside. Now here is what we need to change. When you do copy paste, remember that copy paste also requires some common sense, right? Which is you change the names and the mapping. So here you have name, form control name is name, and you have email. This is important. All right, so name and email, or you can add any fields of your choice. That is up to you, but we'll stick with name and email for learning purpose. Alrighty, so we got name, we got email address, save it. Alright, so it is successfully done and it failed to compile. Let's check the error. Okay, so it says update user is not there because we did not write that method. So let's write implement update user. Okay, so we will implement that in just a bit. What we are going to do is just simply throw in a console whenever we submit, or we'll take this particular form and just load that value. This dot edit user form dot value. Okay, all right, so far so good. Now the error should be resolved and it's compiled successfully. Go back to application. Now you see in the edit we are seeing the name and the email. Okay, so name is not mapped. Let's see why. In the template here we have the email and here we have the name. Let's check what we have given here. Name, user details. So there is no field like name, I believe. So we are going to use something called first name. I believe that's what is there. Let's check one more time, or if it's not there. So it says cannot find control with name. Okay, so what we are going to do is copy this first name here, change this also the same to first name. Alright, so let's check the object for what value it has. cannot find first name. So that's the problem. That so you need to be sure about what is the object you are building. So I'm going to do a console log and this dot user details. So now we will know what data to display. So you can see here there is something called name, right? So we are going to use user details dot name, and it's always a good name, good thing to change. These are two generic names, right? So I'm going to use username here, username. So it says cannot find control by the name username. I think we are missing something. Let's check it out. Username. Let's go here. We have the form control by the name username, and let's see what we missed in the HTML. Did we miss anything? Name is form control name is username, and email, this is username. Save it in edit. Let's go back, and we have the new form control. Let's save this and let's check one more time. Cannot find control with name, cannot find control with name username. Okay, and I think the problem is not here, the problem is somewhere else. I think let's do one thing, let's comment out this. I think it's this one is not causing. What is causing the problem? So let's check one more time. I got the object, I'm assigning the value, we got the details here, form control user details dot name. Okay, cannot convert undefined or null object. Okay, so that's the problem. So what we are going to do, we'll stick to this, we'll assign this user details here, and we will have the name field cannot find username. That's because it's not resolving it, right? So we are going to, it's coming inside. So here we will say if this dot user details, then you build the form. I think now it should be resolved. Okay, okay, my bad, sorry. Okay, so the problem is not in the component, the problem is here. So whenever you see such message, you'll see that more often. So we should wait for the data to load. I think that's the problem. So sorry about that. So I'm going to say data loaded, right? So I'm going to put data loaded, okay, and a parameter which will say data loaded or not. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to initially here I'm going to say data loaded equal to false. It's just a flag variable. We need to make sure that data is loaded first. So boolean equal to false, and here at the end, once we have done building the form, we'll say data loaded equal to true. So now you should not see that error. See, we don't see that because it's waiting for the data to load. Okay, so that was the mistake. So make sure that you get that right. So now we have the data. So we'll need a submit button for it. Again, I'll just copy directly the button here from create and add it here. Okay, so say update user. All right, so update user, we got the button. Let's throw in a h2 and say update user. Okay, and you, like I said, we wrapped it around into a mat card, right, like this. So let's just do the same and wrap all of this data into mat card component. Going to say mat card content, then mat card closing. Okay, so here I'm going to say update user, update user. This should be good now, right? So we got a mat card, you see the background, and we can throw in some kind of a padding and say style, say padding top the pixel. So there is some gap between these two. Now you see update user, we got a white background matte card, update user. So go back to listing, click on edit, you see the username and date, and click here. So now let's update this value and say, okay, so now we need to call a method in our service to update the data actually. But before that, let's check what value is getting captured. On click, you see here that it is capturing correctly the name and the username. So perfect. Now in our component, we'll go to our user service and write a method to update. So here you see we got list, add, update, delete. So we'll write update user, will pass the ID, which is a string. Then we will also pass the body, right, or the user object that we have to update the data. Just like add, right? The only difference will be is the method here will be not post, it will be put. So you will pass the ID of the user that you want to update. So put, if you want to refer to it, you will see that just do this and you will see the methods. You will see URL, you will see body, right? And you will see a condition to it. So we can say which URL you want to go after and what is the data that you want to send and what is the ID of the value that you are trying to update. That are the three things that you will require to pass. So let's do that. First, let's pass the ID. So here, if you see the URL, it will be users slash plus the ID. That is the user ID, right? User slash ID. And this will be the user object. So there is an extra one, got rid. Okay, so if you want to figure out what is this URL, since we are using this web API, you can see here put, right? So it will be slash post slash one slash user slash one, etc. So in our case, it is users slash ID and the user object that we will send. Okay, so far so good. Now let's call this in our component, which is edit component. Once we will say once the user has clicked on this update user, then what we need to do, we need to call user service and we have to call update user, and here we'll pass the ID, which is nothing but this dot user ID, and the user object, which is this dot user details, you edit user form dot value, right? So this is pretty simple, straightforward one. We are calling the service, calling the method, passing the ID and the form value, right? So similarly we did in create user, right? So I'm going to use this as it is just so because we have the snack bar, right? So I don't want to code it again, sit and waste your time. So dot subscribe to this event, since it's an observable, you'll get subscription. Once you get snack bar, you need to import that also in the constructor private snack bar mat snack bar, and then you will say here user updated successfully, unable to update user. Okay, beautiful. So we are done. All right, so let's check it out. So once you update any user like this, and let's see the call that is going in the network, right? So there is no call now. When I hit update user, it says user updated successfully. See in the network that you sent the value to user slash 3. It is a put method. You can see the data that was sent here as part of the payload, and we have got a success 200. That means this was updated successfully, right? So this is how you would implement a edit functionality in any of your Angular applications, right? So that covers all our CRUD operations, right? Create, read, update, and delete. But there is something that we can always add, which is form validation, right? So if you see our create and edit forms, they are pretty dull. They don't do anything. So let's add validations. To add validations, you can just use the built-in validators. So extend it and say you can add any number like it is required, comma. I'm going to say validators dot minimum length right? So what is the minimum length? What is the maximum length that they can enter? Let's see, right? Minimum length, I'm saying 3, right? So this is for the username, right? So similarly, copy, add it to all the fields wherever you want. You can add required. This is email, right? So since it's an email, you have a validator called dot email. Now I'm going to say phone number maximum can have 10, right? So we will say dot max length is 10. Okay. So see here, minimum length you can add maximum, email, required or not, right? Whether you want it to be a dot null validator, or these are all the regular HTML validations that you can use, right? So you can use any of those. Then save it. Now let's test it out in the add user first. Click on add. Now see, click here, it says these are required. So we need to disable the form till the user has entered the details, right? So we will add a condition to the button. We will not enable it. So we'll say disable it till this form is not valid. What is the name of the form? Add user form, and make it add user form dot disable if it is not valid. Now see here, failed to compile. Okay, user form dot valid. There is some error. Let's check it out. It says disabled, not disable. Sorry about that. Make sure that you don't make the spelling mistakes. Okay. And it's see, the errors will teach you much more than anything. So you see here, now the button is totally disabled. You can't do anything till you enter the correct details, right? So like if you don't enter something, it will show you the red color, but you want some error message, you can do that also and show the messaging that it has, whatever message it has, right? Similarly, if I enter this, it will be error. The good idea is to always prompt the user. See, it is minimum 3. So now I entered 3, I enter 2, it will be error, red color border. Also, you can show the error message, that what is the error message. I will cover that later. But today was to just add the validations, right? So similarly, you can add validations to the edit component, right? Cool. So that's all for today. I'll cover. I don't want to drag it long. But what is the plan for the next steps on this particular project is we will add data table, right? This list doesn't look nice like this. We'll make it into a data table, right? That's number one. We will add more validation common, I would say, common validations for forms, right? And error messaging, right? So that is something that we will learn how to. I'll show you how to use error messaging. Third, we will learn, I'll also show you how to use interceptor to track any HTTP errors. Okay. Then we will also do typecasting. This is extremely important. If you are really serious about working with Angular, you should know typecasting, since all our coding is done in TypeScript, right? So typecasting is very important piece of any project. Alright, so that is what I have in mind. Do let me know if you have anything else that you want me to cover in the next episode. I'll cover that, and that would be, let me know how you are finding this particular tutorial. This is more of a hands-on tutorial than explanation, but please do check out my Angular 10 series, where I have covered um, entirely in detail on each of these aspects that we have covered about Angular. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you in the next episode. If you like my work and tutorials, please do consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/artutorials. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.